death by a Chinese officer. His skin was torn from his body because they found a St. Christopher's cross around his neck. He died from exposure, shock, and loss of blood. Bagman, a U.S. Army Green Beret, Bagman died of wounds received from Soviet officer's pistol following torture and interrogations. Cowboy from Texas.
Wait a minute, Chip. The Soviets interrogated him?
The Soviets interrogated him.
Okay, keep going.
Cowboy, Texas, U.S. Army Green Beret. Cowboy was tortured by a Soviet officer and a Chinese officer. He died of suffocation. The way he died of suffocation is they were tied to poles, not given any food or water. The poles were close to the fire. They were severely dehydrated, starving to death, and when they finally asked for something to eat, when Cowboy asked, please, yes, give me something to eat, they cut a chunk out of the thigh of the other person, Flame, who was on the torture poles with him, and shoved it down his throat. He choked to death. Flame, a U.S. Army Green Beret. Flame was killed with Cowboy on the torture post by Soviet and Chinese officers. He was decapitated by a Chinese officer during the interrogation. Snake, U.S. Marines. Snake was tortured and interrogated by the Soviet and Chinese officer. He also died by decapitation. Pablo, Mexican descent, U.S. Navy SEALs. Pablo escaped during torture, but was captured, interrogated, and tortured to death by a Soviet officer. If you folks listen, these are all Soviet officers and Chinese officers doing the interrogations on us, not Vietnamese officers. Haystack from Kansas, U.S. Army Green Beret. Haystack was shot in the abdomen by a Chinese officer. He died of his wounds only minutes after the U.S. Marine Patrol liberated us and began treating his wounds. It was Haystack's heroism that attracted the Marines' attention to us so that they could liberate us. Pop, our platoon sergeant, U.S. Army Green Beret. Pop's actual name was Chuck. Was wounded in the chest and head by U.S. Marines. The Marine was not aware that Pop was a U.S. serviceman. They got in a firefight. They saw us running through the jungle as we got out of our cages. He probably did survive his wounds. Colby wouldn't tell me for sure, but he told me at that time he wasn't dead. He was shipped stateside for emergency medical care. And the last member of the team was Highway, or Bulldog. Bulldog was my call sign over there, and I'm speaking to you today.
Okay, you say Colby said that Pop probably survived?
Colby did. Colby and gave me the feeling that Pop was absolutely alive and he was fine.
And you have
he was also being held. He too would be held close to the White House through his term.
And do you have any idea what his last name was? Chuck's last name?
I have several names that I'm waiting. I've written, and I'm waiting to see if any of those are him.
You mean you guys were working together on a regular basis? You didn't know each other's last names?
That's the compartmentalization of special operations missions.
That's the tactic they use, huh?
That's correct.
That way, when you get out, there's no way you can go back and recontact them.
There's no corroboration.
No corroboration. Boy, how clever, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And you said that Colby was aware of this. What did Colby say when you confronted him with the information that you were supposed to have been assassinated after the Operation Red Rock?
He said that, yes, we were. It was Nixon's orders. Nixon intended us to, and if I didn't stay in line, I still would be.
If you wait a minute, if he told you if you didn't stay in line, you still would be what, assassinated?
He said there's nothing I can do to protect you other than ensure Washington that you're fine, you're working with us fine, and you're not going to say anything. You'll be quiet about this.
Did he say whose idea it was to kill all you folks? Or was
it was Nixon's idea. He passed that on to General Haig and to Henry Kissinger. Kissinger and Haig were against it, and it was Kissinger and Haig who finally got the authorization of that routine patrol of Marines to come in across the lines into Cambodia, and as they were mapping for a major offensive, and liberate us.
Was that a patrol of Marines specifically sent across to try to locate you?
That's correct.
And what about these mountain men? How many of them were there?
The Montagnards?
Yes.
There were 6 of them to begin with, but there were only 2 of them when they were driving the truck out. And those are the 2 that we eliminated pretty short order.
Well, why would they just assign 2 to eliminate 13?
Well, after 13 have been through the type of mission that we've been through, we were rag-tired, we were beat. It wasn't going to be hard to take a AK-47 and wipe everyone out sitting in the back of a truck. Okay.
Okay, folks, we'll be right back. Ted Gunderson Intelligence Report. No question about it. Tatum. And I want to go back just very briefly, Chip, and review the first hour for those on the second hour who did not hear it. Folks, we talked about how they shut down the radar. Radar can be avoided. during these drug drops. We talked about how 18 tons of cocaine was allowed to slip through in the United States with the knowledge of the CIA through Mexico. We talked about a meeting that Bush attended April the 12th, 1985 in Honduras. His advance man, Don Gregg, met with Chip, and Gregg passed a briefcase full of money delivered to the embassy, and it was the money was or to be taken to William Barr and other William Barr, former Attorney General of the United States. The instructions given to Bush and we talked about the Prime Minister of Sweden, how he was eliminated because Olof Palme, is that his name?
Olof Palme, that's correct.
He was eliminated because he wouldn't play ball with George Bush at all. We talked about Ollie North and Don Gregg having meetings, and we talked about the radar line that's been built across the Pacific and around Central and South America. There's no reason we cannot stop the drugs from flowing into this country. Is there anything else you want to mention that we talked about in the first hour, Chip?
No reason whatsoever. I would like to say on the Team Red Rock item, Colby was also against this, and he was the point man who had to do the on-site planning for the mission, the day-to-day planning. He knew, like he told me, he knew that 2 Montagnards wouldn't have a chance against us. That's why only 2 were put there. However, it was Haig's job to convince the president that 2 would be sufficient.
So the President Nixon, knew that much detail about the operation. He did not delegate it then, huh?
He did not delegate it. That was his baby.
Yeah, it was his baby. So Colby knew that there was not that you were going to be able to make it out of that.
That's right.
Well, my hat's off to Colby, who was obviously murdered by elements unknown, probably tied into the government. So anything else you want to mention about Operation Red Rock?
No, I'm glad I'm here. I'm happy to be alive.
I guess you are, and you're very fortunate, and thank goodness that you're able to come forward now and expose these nefarious activities on the part of the U.S. intelligence. I want to make it very clear, folks, that there's a lot of good people out there. I mean, look at Chip, and what a great American he is. Rambo, John Wayne, all wrapped up in one. And there's a lot of good people in the service, in the CIA and the FBI and DEA and, ATF, and I'm sure there's some good ones in customs and so forth. But their hands are tied because our system has been infiltrated at the very top. The very top, right up to the White House. And look at Colby. His hands were tied. He tried, and Haig, General Haig, and Henry Kissinger, they tried to talk Nixon out of this. He would not be talked out of it. So they have to follow their orders. And that's basically what the problem is in this country today, isn't it, Chip?
That's right. The orders come from above. Who do you tell?
Yeah, who do you tell, and what do? You have to follow them or you're dead.
That's correct.
Or they send you to jail and discredit you. We need to get into some other areas, Chip. By the way, I'm going to have you back on a regular basis. How about once a week?
That would be nice.
Yeah, because there's so much we can talk about that we haven't touched on that I want to ask you about. We need to dig this out and make it available to the American people. Chip, is there anything more that you want to mention about radar, about Bush on the second hour, about Colby, about Kissinger, about General Haig? And I think I mentioned on one of the other shows I interviewed Haig at the White House on one occasion in connection with a possible criminal violation. And believe it or not, Chip, I actually read him his rights.
He needs them read.
And, I attended a State Department dinner after I retired in Washington, D.C., and I went up and said, hey, General Haig, do you remember me? He looked at me and says, oh, yes. He says, are you going to have me indicted? And anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. This is your show, not mine. So what about this recruiting of civilians? That's an area that I find very fascinating. Back in the early 80s, there was a presidential directive issued that allowed the CIA to infiltrate or be reassigned, I guess, on a sub rosa covert basis in other agencies for cover. And then if they had an assignment, they were pulled out of, say, the Department of Energy or pulled out of the Pentagon or whatever the case might be, and used for their assignment. But at the same time, this presidential directive allowed the CIA and other intelligence agencies, including the FBI, of course, to use civilians for some of their dirty work. Are you familiar with that?
Sure. I headed up what's called proprietary companies, where we would hire and contract in civilians to do the job. Okay,
let's get back in. It seems like the time runs out on us. As soon as we get into the subject, we have the music. Okay, the music. We'll be right back. Coach Ted Gunderson, Intelligence Report. we're back, and my guest is Chip Tatum. Chip, a 25-year veteran, CIA deep cover. Chip, somebody called in during the break and want to know what the public can do to help you locate Chuck.
I don't know that the public can do much. I'm doing quite a bit now, and I think that I've narrowed it down to 6 individuals, and I'm sure that one of these is Chuck.
Okay, well, that's good. And if you locate him, ask him if he wants to go on the show.
You bet I will.
And let's hope he's still alive. What about, going back to this operation, I'm going to come to, we got a caller on the line, but I'll come right back to you, John, in Colorado, but I want to ask a couple of questions before I forget it. It slipped by my mind. So you did not know the names of any of these people on Operation Red Rock, did you?
Nope.
You didn't know their first names either?
Well, yeah, and I go over the first names of several of these in the book. Okay.
So there's no way of getting a hold of their relatives or their loved ones and telling them what happened to them?
No way that I'm aware of. I know my family was notified that I was a KIA initially.
KIA meaning?
Killed in action.
Killed in action.
So I believe that they too were notified.
So they were notified of that, but they don't know the circumstances or the details. Right?
That's right.
Okay, if any of you folks have any idea who these people might be, give me your address, your phone number, whatever, Chip. If anybody happens to think that it might be somebody, one of their relatives, in other words.
Sure. My address is P.O. Box 895082, Leesburg, Florida, 34789.
Okay. I've got a suggestion for you, Chip. Why don't we put you in touch with a real professional artist who can do artist conceptions of each one of these people and put it in your book?
Oh, that would be pretty nice.
Okay, this is a little investigative technique that I've used in the past.
Sure.
Let's talk about that after the show. Also, some other things I want to talk to you about. I've got a network of people that I can put you in touch with that might be able to help you also.
Great.
Okay, now, John from Colorado. Hi, John.
Hi, gentlemen. This is really great.
Where are you from, Colorado, John?
Oh, I'm from the Denver area.
Denver, okay.
Real quick, Chip, this isn't my main question, but when you guys are out there in the field in your operations, why don't you secretly disclose to each other who you are just for each other's protection?
The time that we spent together was about 2 weeks. The 2 weeks was a very intensified training. We know, actually they know, having been working with the company and with others, there probably isn't a need to. We did put things in place back at headquarters with another person to help us through. So my way suspected what was going on and took care of that for us.
I see. Okay, here's my question. Are you familiar with the methodology of substituting for people with synthetic anatomatrons or robotrons?
No.
Like, I guess, Jimmy Carter supposedly has an anatomatron, a synthetic anatomatron, which is it's a DNA-contrived organic grown material that's a duplication of him.
A double?
Uh-huh.
Sure. A lot of leaders have doubles that travel around while they sit in meetings, actual meetings. That's no. I don't know if they're to that level or that technology. But you know, when science comes out and says we've finally cloned sheep, it means the government has known about that technique for many, many, many years.
Right. Well, that's my understanding, is that Jimmy Carter was cloned with a synthetic substitute that was actually grown in a laboratory. It's interesting. The other question is, are you familiar at all with the helicopter, since you're a helicopter pilot, with the presidential helicopter that blew up with the 4 agents in it?
This president has had a lot of problems with his helicopters. I'm well aware of that.
And airplanes.
That's correct. With airplanes, C-130, and actually there have been 2 presidential helicopters that have gone down in this administration.
Are you aware of the one that killed 4 of his aged bodyguards?
I'm not sure how many people and who was on, but I am aware of 2 that have gone down. Two of the Marine helicopters.
Where did they go down, Chip?
One went down on a test flight in I guess in the Virginia area. The other, I'm not sure. I was in prison that time. A friend had told me, an investigative friend, over the phone.
I think this was April of '92 is the one I'm thinking of. It was in the papers.
Well, if any of you Secret Service agents are out there listening and you're flying around in Bill Clinton's helicopters, you better take precautions.